All right, guys, another week, another episode. Here we go.
There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Western Huntsman podcast. This is your host, Jim Huntsman, coming at you from the Broken Tine studio right here in Clark Fork, Idaho. Man, that is a mouthful sometimes. Guys, this week I am bringing on somebody. In fact, this is the first time I've talked to him, and I always like these because I feel like we get a lot of good information out of episodes like this when it's just a new introduction, and we're introduced by my buddy Scott Reekers over at Eastmans Hunting Journals. And we're going to talk all sorts of things from conservation issues to getting tags. Maybe, we'll talk about point systems and the like from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, because a few of you have messaged me and you're like, well, let's talk about, how to get tags. I'm the wrong guy to ask for that, but I did offer the episode. And so we're going to touch on that in this episode because it's there's a lot to it. And there's tons of information out there to help you. So, including the Eastman's Tag Hub, by the way. I'm going to throw that out there. Jaden Bales, how's it going, brother?
It's going really good. Thanks for having me on, and man, thanks for some of the podcasts you've been doing lately. I tell you what, like you have mentioned that you would ruffle some feathers, and I think that those podcasts where you're having deep discussions and asking hard questions are important. So, thanks for doing that. I think you're doing a good job.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting with that because, honestly, it doesn't matter what you talk about in the hunting space, dude. You're going to ruffle feathers no matter what.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I do worry sometimes people are taking the premise of the message wrong. Like like for me personally, like I'm not coming after the concept of is hunting conservation. I'm questioning how we're presenting that to the general public and meaning the general non-hunting public. That's more my shtick with that concept. And Chris Rowe he's got his side of it, and he's very well studied on the topic. Guy, same thing. And the nice thing is those guys are able to kind of carry the torch because they're a lot smarter than I am. But it's a good time. I don't know. It's a good time. It definitely ruffled feathers, like you said.
Well, I think it's good, man, because when we look at the future of hunting and how we're going to make a difference somehow, I don't think you can do it without making sure that you have 90% or I guess 80% of the population on board with it.
Oh yeah.
It's you guys talked about how, okay, you've got like 10% of the world is like hardcore anti-hunting. 10% of the world are hunters like us. But then you have the 80% in the middle. And the way that we talk about how we do what we do and what we do when it comes to hunting, it just makes a big difference, especially when you're not just around the campfire with your buddies or whatever. So that's something I think about a lot.
I think that's thus far one of my biggest takeaways is we just have to remember, especially like on social media, when we're representing hunting, we're not sitting around the campfire with our other hunting buddies, and we've just got to kind of keep that in mind. Thus far is I don't know. I think that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, man. And the other thing is too, like we now are reaching folks that we wouldn't have reached 20 years ago because of how we communicate online. I learned this the hard way when I was in college. I posted up this grip and grin of a black bear that I had just killed with my brother.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't like a big uproar or anything, but I went to school at the University of Oregon. where not everyone had seen a dead bear, let alone thought that they could be hunted. So I had some pretty interesting conversations following that, and it was kind of eye opening. I was like, oh shoot, like the rest of the world doesn't live this way. So yeah, it's something we always got to keep in mind.
Yeah, there's it's the disparity between the two Americas, I call it. Like I always think of things like goofy thing. This is how my mind works. Like, what if a bear hunter was going to Berkeley? You know what I mean? And just like I don't know. It wouldn't even work. I just can't even see it working. But anyway, but before we go down all those rabbit trails, let's give the audience a kind of an idea of who you are. Like I told you, man, I know who you are from listening to you on Cody's podcast, A Rich Outdoors. And that's about the extent of what I know about you. And so let's start there, man. Give us a snapshot.
All right. So I grew up in Northeast Oregon, outside of a small farm town called Imbler. And I grew up on a farm, and my family still has a place out there. And then I went off to college, like I talked about, University of Oregon, met a girl, and she wanted to go to grad school. So we sat down and jointly chose that she go to Wyoming. So her and I moved out here, and then that didn't end up working. So I am no longer with that gal, but I sure stayed in Wyoming.
Did she stay in Wyoming too?
I don't know. I haven't talked to her for a while,
okay.
a few years. So that's been so that's how I got here to Wyoming. Is I followed that gal, and then I just wanted to stay so bad. When I had the opportunity to take on this job with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, I jumped at it. I live in Lander now. Been here 3 years in Lander. Was in Laramie for 2 years before that, and I guess a year and a half before that. And so, this state's really just caught my attention. It's really just taken me in, at least from how many opportunities there are with hunting and fishing, and then I really like the folks that live in this area. So it's been really good.
I was going to ask, like, what is the draw to Wyoming? Because I have a draw to Wyoming as well. But I'm curious, like, what yours is and what makes it a better place for you to live versus where you came from.
So where I came from is actually really similar to Wyoming. Real conservative, farming, ranching town. There's logging, and about 10,000 people in the town, and that's basically what it looks like and what it feels like here. I think the biggest difference is there's definitely live and let live kind of mentality here in Wyoming. And not to mention the fact that the entire state doesn't have a huge metropolitan area that kind of controls the politics. So you end up with a more even spread and a more even representation of kind of how people want to be living in this like rural lifestyle that we all love, right?
Yeah.
So it just really fits well with kind of how I like to live my life, and also it can't be understated that for residents there's some really dang good hunting opportunities here. And for non-residents, obviously it's limited because there's not all the over-the-counter opportunity and stuff like that, but still, it just is a place that I really appreciate, and I appreciate kind of the old ways that they're still holding on to in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I do too, man. The Forever West state has got that where it's almost like well, I'll put it to you this way. I was telling you before we started recording, I live down in Salt Lake, and Salt Lake is a pretty conservative area for the most part. But
especially for a big city.
But it is losing that. It is like it's kind of losing that grip. And so it was interesting for the day job that I had to go to Wyoming all the time. I spent a lot of time in Wyoming under the guise that I was working really hard, but really I was barely working and fishing really hard. But so there's that part of it. But it was interesting. It was like when you'd cross that Wyoming line, it was like stepping back into what America was. if that makes sense. And not like Utah's not like that, because Utah, if you come from Sacramento to Salt Lake City, you're stepping back into what America, that American feeling that used to be, that doesn't seem present in some of those big metro areas anymore. So, and I'm mainly what I'm doing is I'm advocating for folks in California that are considering leaving California, going to Wyoming instead of Idaho, because of how much better it is there. Is that fair?
Yeah. Hard no. So, this is something that I think about a lot, because like you pointed out early on, like, what's the difference between where you live now versus where I came from? And I think one of the things is that I don't see this. I'd like to not see this place change too awful much, and whenever someone kind of moves someplace, they move there for a myriad of reasons, but oftentimes someone will move there and see that they need to change it and try to improve it. And I don't know that that's always the direction that these places need to go. I think about that in both senses of like a Californian moving out and, wanting maybe the political realm to be a certain way, or even on the inverse of that, trying to develop it out and, maybe have, fewer wild spaces because they're trying to make sure that the economy is a certain way. I think that there's a lot of balance you got to run with all these conversations. It's not anytime you're trying to change the place from what it is, it makes me nervous.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you nailed it, man. I was making a joke, and that's mostly, that joke is for my buddies like Chris McKelvey and Mike Bozarth. They're California guys that are now Idahoans, and we're proud to have them. But I do still like to kid around about it, because there is that side of it where I think that I always look at it like this, because I don't know how we even got on this topic, dude. But like, if I lived in California, I would get the hell out of there as fast as I could. Right. Yeah. So I don't blame them. But there is that sense of we've had a huge influx of out-of-staters move into the state of Idaho. And the more you have come to your state, the more of that population, there's a percentage of them that want to change things and like take it to a place that is similar to what they left. And it's like they don't even know the destruction that brings with it. They just think it's better because that's what they've always known. They don't understand that maybe not having those things is what makes life so good in places like Idaho and Wyoming and Montana.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Anyway, enough with that. The moral of the story is California. Wyoming is, the housing costs are a lot more advantageous, and the hunting's better, the fishing's better.
I could guarantee you're not going to make it rich, though, in the tech industry. No. That's one of the things. My mom is, she's a professor, and she teaches nursing, and she keeps sending me these different jobs, communication jobs. She's like, look how much money you can make. And I was like, yeah, Mom, stop.
In Oregon?
They don't have, in Oregon. Yeah. And I keep going like, no way. Like, I'm sorry, you can't trade the outdoor experiences for any amount of money. But I will say it's a good thing that we get to kill some things, because groceries are pretty expensive.
God, no kidding, man. They're super high right now. Like, I don't know what I was in the grocery store with my wife the other day, and we don't buy eggs. We have chickens, and so
same here. Yeah.
Same kind of thing. But I just, for some reason, I was grabbing milk or something. She's like, get the milk. And I always grabbed the wrong one. So I had to go back and get the right one that she wanted. And it's right next to the eggs. And I looked at the prices. It was like $5. It was like $4.98 for 2 dozen eggs. And I might be misquoting that, but it was somewhere around there. And I was blown away. I'm like, man, I can't believe I'm in the wrong business. Maybe I need to get more chickens and start selling to the grocery stores or something.
Well, I don't disagree with you, man. But yeah, no, that is a drawback though. We always have these conversations where like, you can move out there. It's so great. And then I'm like, also make sure you have a game plan here for how you're going to make a living. Cause, that's what's kept Wyoming such a low population state all along. It's not easy to make a living out here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's barely over 500,000 people in the state of Wyoming. I think it's the least populated state in the country, isn't it?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So that says a lot. There's less people there than I believe in Alaska, and it's a much smaller state. So cool spot, man. I'm kind of jealous you're in Lander. Tell us a little bit about what you do for Wyoming Wildlife Federation.
All right. So I am the communications guy. So basically, I take all of our different programs and make sure that I send out email, social media, manage our website, and buy ads or set up press releases, that kind of thing for all the different programs that we run. We basically have 4 things that we do. We do advocacy, which means we've got a full-time person down at the legislature. Her name's Jess Johnson. I'll disclose she's also my significant other, but she just left for the whole legislative session, which is 8 weeks in Cheyenne.
Uh-huh.
We've got, so that's advocacy. We've got a habitat program with a guy named Sam Lockwood who basically comes up with habitat projects throughout the year. We fund them and then also put people on the ground to replace fences or put in beaver dam analogs, like fake beaver dams, and stuff like that. We've got a kids education program, which is relatively new, but we've got a bunch of kids camps that are recent that just teaching kids about the outdoor world and how to be really good outdoors people, by both teaching them, the leave no trace stuff, but then also some entry level stuff with fishing and hunting. And then lastly, we've got a whole policy position we just had some turnover because we upgraded our policy person to our executive director. So, but the policy person is basically looks at how we manage public land, how we manage wildlife policy, and make sure that the hunters and anglers have a voice at the table. So we're talking about like wildlife crossings, how the BLM manages land, and how the National Forest manages land, that kind of stuff.
How does that break down in terms of I'm curious in the state of Wyoming, when it comes to like legislative issues, do hunters and anglers have a pretty strong voice in Wyoming? Because I imagine they do, but maybe I'm off base.
Oh man, it is. I think it's one of the things that keeps us so effective is that, Wyoming really has a large portion of the residents who hunt and fish, right? Mm-hmm. Most of our legislators hunt and fish. Like there's a huge portion of them that get it from where we're coming from. The important thing too is to remember, because we have such small population, votes are decided by a couple hundred, oftentimes at these local levels. So these senators and representatives, they listen to individual, constituents, and they listen to them very well. You can just go have a coffee or a beer with them. Mm-hmm. We did a legislative overview last week, and we do these kind of adult education things at the bar here. And we had one of the local senators just show up just because he was, we're talking about the legislature. He's like, by gosh, I want to be there. And, that kind of relationship with the local senators and representatives is freaking sweet. It helps really make a difference, especially when someone shows up and talks to them in person and doesn't just yell at them from a screen or via email,
Yeah. How long have you been with them, Wildlife? Or I keep getting tongue-tied because I told you I'm on the board of Idaho Wildlife Federation, so I keep wanting to say that. But Wyoming Wildlife Federation, how long have you been with them?
Well, so when I moved to Laramie, I immediately got involved with WWF as a volunteer and as an ambassador. So that was coming on 5 years ago now. And so that's how I kind of just got tapped on the shoulder to ask if I wanted to take this job because I was already really involved as a volunteer. Mm-hmm. So this is my 3rd year as a staff member, but 5th year involved with these guys in this work. So that was kind of I just from a friend of a friend. I like to big game hunt. That's definitely what I spend most of my time doing. But I do consider myself kind of an overall outdoorsman, and these guys, the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, works on the gambit of issues from fishing to small game to waterfowl and also big game. The big game is the sexy stuff, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that like Wyoming residents listening to this need to know about this year's legislative session?
Yeah, we can go a couple different directions with that if you want. There's some interesting bills that are coming up, but the number one thing that we do at Wyoming Wildlife Federation is try to just like more than trying to influence it ourselves. We're trying to make sure that the Wyoming residents have all the tools they need to go and make an impact, however, which way they want to advocate, right? Mm-hmm. So we have this yearly event called Camel at the Capitol where we bring in hunters from around the state as long as the roads are open. And
yeah,
and everyone gets to the Capitol.
In Wyoming too.
Oh yeah. That's February 2nd this year. So we're going to have people come down to the Capitol on February 2nd. And they get a little bit of a training on how this whole lobbying and how talking to your legislators work. And then the second half of the day, we go to the Capitol and people call out their senators and representatives and talk to them, ask them to vote different ways. So if a resident's listening and they can get down to that thing, that is huge. Otherwise, follow along with us and seeing what bills pop up that we share about is another good way.
By the way, those of you listening in Idaho, we do the same thing. Camo at the Capitol down in Boise. I don't remember the date. It's coming up. I'll have to look. Jump on Idaho Wildlife Federation, the website or the Instagram page or whatever, and you'll find it.
Yeah, dude. These the Idaho Wildlife Federation. You and I talked a little bit beforehand offline, but those guys are doing an awesome job, and it's cool to see. Not all wildlife federations have to agree on what they talk about or how they do it. But I will say, like the Idaho Wildlife Federation and Wyoming Wildlife Federation, I think do a lot of the same things and are doing a pretty similar work in both places.
So, and tell us a little bit about your, I don't want to call it obsession, your passion for searching for tags and building points and your knowledge base in that kind of arena.
So I grew up I told you I grew up in Imbler. And if someone looks at the map, that is right up in the northeast corner where there were the big three elk hunts, the big three Rocky Mountain elk hunt units in Oregon. So from an early age, it was always like, okay, like when am I going to draw one of these archery elk tags, and then as I got a little older, I couldn't draw the rifle tag every year to hunt in the Mount Emily unit. So that year, it was about the time I was a junior or senior in high school. Junior year, I think, is when I drew that last tag, and then I couldn't draw my senior. So then I was like, all right, well, screw this. I'm going to pick up a bow and then start figuring this thing out so I can go hunt as much as possible. Well, little did I know the bow hunting would be really addicting. So, but that whole process ended up just leading me into figuring out what it looks like for the rest of the states. And then that year that I moved to Wyoming, I was like trying to make sure I could get some hunting in, and I was a non-resident. So I got to learn the non-resident Wyoming system. I got a pronghorn on a second choice tag as a non-resident the year I moved here, and I was like, "Holy cow! You can play the game and really find some interesting opportunities across the West." I think.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that's what I don't know if I want to say we've been lacking. And that's really not the focus of this show, but I do. Here's a great example. We do the School of September series. Which, by the way, tell Cody I need to get him on for School of September, man. He's a good ass elk hunter. I need him on.
Okay, I'm sure he would do it. He loves it, man. And him and I were just texting all night last night about this stuff, trying to figure out. And this ties back into your conversation. It ties back into we were sitting there scheming because we're looking at, we've got a handful of points in Colorado. He's got enough points in Arizona to maybe go hunting soon. And it's all just trying to find the ways to make the most of your time we have on this God's green earth to go hunt as much as possible.
What's like your overall strategy with getting tags in terms of, a lot of people, they do a lot of point building for states or units that require like 2 or 3 points. And then they have like a long game, for, something like Arizona unit. what is it, Unit 9 or something in Arizona.
Yeah.
They have 2 or 3 of those going on. Do you have like an overall strategy? Are you trying to build the most points everywhere, or are you focused on like specific areas?
I think he who has the most points is ultimately the loser. I don't think that in today's day and age, like if you're sitting on points in a bunch of different states, I think you should really address your strategy here. The idea of having a point is to go hunting, not to accumulate points, right? So I think we got, especially in the early days of the point structures, we got really tangled up in the fact that these points were going to get me some XYZ hunt or unit or some opportunity that was supposed to be superior than all the rest. And I think that has really, for a multitude of reasons, that has really hindered us in the long run. But I work for a nonprofit, man. I don't have like an endless budget to put towards hunting.
Yeah.
I actually have $1,000 that I use to apply in different states. And so I've gotten 4 different state rotation. 3 of them are short-term states, and then 1 is a long-term state. And I'm also more of a deer guy, so they're also shifted towards states with different deer opportunities. I think if I was more of an elk guy, maybe Arizona would be higher on my list. But for instance, I don't apply in Arizona just because I don't have the funds to like just tack it on, and It's such a long game that didn't fall into my strategy. So yeah, I think it depends also where you live. Like it's going to be a 20-hour drive for me to go hunt. This is an opportunity hunt in Arizona, like I'd rather not do that. But if you live in West Texas, like there's no reason not to be, especially, New Mexico and Arizona should be on your radar. So if you live down there, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Like do you have, what would be, let's start at a very elementary level here because I want to,
let's do it.
My hesitation with some of this part of this discussion, Jaden, is like, I don't want to get on the bad side of certain people living in certain states because we're like advocating for that unit or that state, and we're not going to talk specific units here, but I don't want people to have negative blowback, but I do want people to be educated enough to know, and the people that might give me blowback need to understand, like, people are coming to your state to hunt no matter what. So it doesn't matter what I say. It's not like, I'm helping them or you're helping them. So I guess that's my hesitation. I don't know. I did an episode like a year ago and like I said, the smallest little thing about a particular state that nobody would even identify. And I got like 10 nasty emails over it. Anyway, so we're going to avoid like, very specific things, but can you give listeners that, let's say there's people listening that don't know jack about going out of state to hunt. They're just getting into this. Maybe they're new hunters, or they've always been happy hunting their own state. But they want to start dipping their toes into the points game and tag draw game and all that kind of stuff, and get their feet wet somewhere else. Do you have a recommendation on like what 3 states they should focus on for a short game? And when I say short game, within the next 5 years or less?
I actually think that you're hitting on something that's really important. Everyone who gets kind of upset about people putting a state or unit on blast or whatever, like, it's because people are assuming that is the place that someone's going to look at and be like, that's for me, I'm going to go there. And for people looking for places to go, I think you've got it backwards. You need to start with like the species you're looking for, like what kind of terrain you want, and what's closest to your home. Like, where can you go more frequently, right?
Uh-huh.
So we put too much, like, we drive past, I'm so guilty of this. We drive past places that we can be hunting all the time, just because we heard of some grass is greener remark in this place or another. I'm actually guilty of it. Like, within my home state of Wyoming, is I used to go the last few years. I used to spend a bunch of time in Western Wyoming, driving 4 hours to go into this, to go mule deer hunting. Well, the biggest deer I've ever killed was actually one I shot 9 miles from my house. Like, because I actually scouted hard and was able to look over a bunch of deer, pattern them, and then kill them on the opening day of rifle season. It was like,
I've done that. Similar thing. Drive 6 hours when there's a big one, 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, man. So I think that is where we need to start, is like, what's the species? Like, what are people wanting out of it? And how far is it from their home? Like, someone from Texas is going to get a different answer than someone from Wisconsin, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point, man. I didn't really think about that. I think that a lot of people, one of the downfalls is you have some states that are like over the counter, and you know, those are go-tos for every year, which are Colorado. Well, I'm talking elk, so maybe it's different for mule deer, but you have, you know, those go-to over the counter states. And I think a lot of people, like in the Midwest and back east, they miss out on some really good hunting because they're so focused on this over the counter thing. And I think that's like a sense of pride too. Oh, I got this deer, I got this elk on an over the counter tag. And I get it, but you're missing out on a lot of hunting, and you're driving past a lot of really good hunting. I want to go back to one thing you kind of brought up there. And well, actually, I brought it up. You kind of reiterated the folks that are getting bent out of shape about units and putting states on blast or whatever. You got to remember something, man. This shit is not a secret. Like, it's not in the year 2023. This stuff is not a secret. Now, there might be a drainage in one particular unit that you know well, and that is a secret, and that is well protected. Like, I have one of those spots. I have an elk spot that I don't even tell family members about this spot. And I'm going to keep it that way. But it's the thing that where I got a bunch of nasty emails was over fly fishing on a very good river in the state of Utah. And let me explain that too. Like, folks, there's only like 3 good rivers in the state of Utah to fly fish. It's not a fucking secret. And so, pardon my, I cuss a lot. Jaden, you cool with that, man? Oh
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You're not blushing?
No.
Okay. The stuff is not a secret. And that's, I think my point is nobody wants to, I hate using the term, we don't want your honey hole, because that's what everybody says on social media. But nobody's doing that. These units that are really good are well known. Like, everybody knows about them. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there so people can not be so sensitive about it.
Well, and the other thing is like, I think people don't have the confidence that if their spot gets blown out, that they can go find a new spot either.
That's a great point. Yeah.
It drives me freaking nuts, because you know what? Like, I'm having a hard time. This deer I killed this year was a really nice deer for this area. And I'm actually like okay with kind of telling people, because they're over here like, driving roads and being like, oh, we saw were does this year, yada, yada. And I was like, look, man, there were 12 bucks in this drainage that I saw 6 people drive by on their razors. Like, this isn't, like we need to be better hunters too. So, and the other thing is, if you're not willing to go try something that isn't put on blast, you're not going to find those honey holes. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if someone says, this is a good example, the Gunnison Basin in Colorado right now is known as a big deer area. It's like, it just is. Mm-hmm. And certainly there are big deer there. But there are also big deer in other places in Colorado. And if you are only tied to try to get one of those tags in the Gunnison Basin, a 3rd or 4th season tag, you're going to be sitting and waiting and not doing much hunting. And I think that this is a whole hypothesis I have here. It goes for bucks and it goes for bulls. But if you want a buck of a lifetime, you better have a lifetime of hunting bucks in your pocket before you get one. Because otherwise, I'm not gonna be sitting here on my deathbed, thinking about that one hunt I had one time. And that goes back to this whole conversation about like these areas that get blown out and these areas that get put on blast. It's like, I think, we got to be willing to do the work ourselves and find these areas ourselves, so that you're not just riding the coattails of people before you.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot to be said for that exact point in a sense that like there's a certain laziness that comes from people that are stuck on like one particular little area.
Mm-hmm.
Like if elk live in an entire unit, let's say the entire unit is elk habitat.
Yeah.
You should be a good enough hunter to go in there and locate elk. Same thing with mule deer. If you know there are deer on the landscape, you should be a good enough hunter to figure out where those deer are going to be. Man, I like mule deer hunting. It's almost time, too. I look forward to mule deer hunting every single year. It's what I grew up on. That is not to say that I'm great at it, but now there's some really good resources available, and my favorite one is over at Eastmans Hunting Journals, where they have the mule deer course. This course has all sorts of digital information for you to go through as an e-course. It's got the basic safety, training and preparation, choosing a hunt, making a hunt plan, gear, scouting, glassing, field judging, rifle hunting, bow hunting, hunt strategy, harvest, the experience. All of it is right there in one spot for you to access and learn from some of the best like Dan Picard and Brian Barney. So up your mule deer hunting game by going to taghub.eastmans.com/courses/online mule deer course. You know what? Just look up Eastman's Hunting Journals and you'll find it. It's super easy. Let them know I sent you. You won't regret it. It's not about a geographical location. It's not about protecting one specific spot. And yes, I know that units do get blown out and people do show up. I've had an area that I love to hunt for mule deer up here, kind of in north central Idaho. I found this spot by doing the hard work, the scouting, and I found it prior to things like Go Hunt and Onyx and all these things that we enjoy now. I found it by just putting boots on the ground, and it has since. I don't hunt there anymore. It did very well for me for a long time, but I don't hunt deer there anymore because it's been discovered or whatever, and so there's a lot of other hunters there. But I don't hunt very far from there either, and I still do pretty good. You know what I mean? And that's the key is being a good enough hunter to be able to know just the behavioral and natural habitat kind of scenarios and cases in which you will find these animals, because it doesn't change that much. It really doesn't change. It changes a lot, like the way that elk go through like a 24-hour cycle or even a 3-day cycle during the rut in the high desert of southern Utah or somewhere in Arizona might be different than the way a 24-hour cycle. When I say cycle, what are they doing at night? What are they doing in the morning? What are they doing midday? What are they doing in the afternoon? That kind of cycle. That's going to be different than an elk at 5,000 feet elevation somewhere in the Idaho Panhandle, right? So I get that, but understanding all those nuances about these specific animals, if you're going to be a hunter, you need to be a prolific enough educator of your own sport and your own craft to know how to find these animals regardless of how busy one particular drainage gets or one dirt road gets or one unit gets. There's always more country. Anyway, I'll stop going off on that tangent, man.
No, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially because of how, social media and forums and stuff they're just a dumpster fire these days, it feels like, because people are caught up on this notion that this exact thing that we're talking about. So, I think it's important though too. Is like, man, if you haven't put in the work to hone the craft, I think you're missing out on a big part of this, man. The craft is where the fun part's at.
And I don't get that, man. That's like half the fun for me. I don't get that. I love going into a new area and identifying where I think there is going to be wild game, and I'm successful at locating them. Like to me, that it turns that into a successful hunt for me, whether I notch a tag or not, because that's the other part of it. That's the other half of it. That's a lot of fun for me. But that initial part, that, the discovery process is part of the hunt, and it's a lot of fun if you take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, where were we, man? I took us down another rabbit trail.
Okay, so the reason why we got there was because you were asking me what 3 states.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
What 3 states do you think people should start applying in or should apply in? And that's where I went off of my big long diatribe of like, look, people aren't considering enough variables once they get started here. Good example is, Nevada. Here's something to think about. Nevada has some, there is a lot of archery deer opportunity in Nevada. If you don't want to go bake your nuts off on August 10th every year and archery hunt deer, you shouldn't be considering hunting in Nevada. Mm-hmm. My significant other, she is a wonderful, she's very patient, very good hunter, but she just tells me to go jump off a cliff every time I mention going and hunting Nevada at 95-degree heat, because she just is not her style.
Dude, hit me up. I'll go with you. Let's do it.
Okay. We'll talk more offline. I've got a few points down there that I need to try. I've been trying to burn them and they won't let me.
Yeah. They make it hard sometimes.
Yeah. But, that's how we ended up on that, is like, we just got to look at more variables, For a good thing is like, for instance, if someone lives out in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and wants to hunt elk, and you're not looking at Montana, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, man. It's like, it's one state over. If you live in St. Louis, Missouri, and you're trying to drive to Idaho, brother, you're driving through 2 different hunting states. There's even 3 different states where you could hunt elk. Don't do that. So that's kind of where I think the gist of the answer lies.
That makes a lot of sense, man. Like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. If the geographic aspect of it will make it more feasible. And I think that's mm-hmm. one of the problems of non-resident out-of-state hunters, especially the guys coming from like back east, it's like they think that it's this big hurdle to get into elk country. Like there's mm-hmm. this big mountain to climb. It's a huge obstacle, and I can get a tag, but then getting there, or I think they make it a bigger problem in their mind than it really is. It's not that hard, man. Get a tag mm-hmm. and come on out. You just gotta, it'll be more feasible and less of an obstacle if you use the geographics to your advantage. If you're driving, especially and most people do, right? I mean, I guess mm-hmm. a lot of people fly.
Yeah, quite a few people fly, but even then, man, it's like. It just gives you a good starting. It gives you a really good starting point. Mm-hmm. The other thing I was considering is like you were mentioning, it's not unfeasible to get out here, but the important thing is like also we've made it. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but we've made it sound like we need every whiz bang gadgetry, like fancy high speed gear that you can afford to go do this thing. And unfortunately, I think more people are spending their paycheck on stuff they don't need than actually trying to have these experiences. Totally. I think just, making sure if it's the difference between a new bow and whether or not you can go buy a Colorado over-the-counter license this year, I'd lean towards the license just so you can go hunting.
Totally, man. Totally. I mean, I have the advantage of being long enough in the tooth to remember back when I was elk hunting in a pair of shitty Nikes, mm-hmm. tennis shoes, and so I don't know that a lot of young hunters have gone through, I shouldn't say that, but growing up, like when I was getting old enough to actually carry my own weapon, bow, rifle, which back then I was all rifle. All I did was rifle hunting was, the early 90s. We didn't mm-hmm. have all this cool gear, man. We didn't for years, I carried a pack that I got at the Army Navy surplus store that was like a Vietnam era infantry military pack. And it was I wouldn't use it today. Let's put it that way.
Dude, it's so true though. Like I had this friend of mine come out and we killed this elk at like 11,000 feet. And the way that we got to the spot was we stayed at my house. So we drove an hour, dropped the 4-wheeler off, rode the 4-wheeler an hour, got off the 4-wheeler, hiked in 3 miles back to this lake, and he shot this bull. And then we kind of were like, oh shit! Like now we have to get it back to back out. So we brought this herd, like 4 people in with us the next day, and we packed this sumbitch out. And it was one of those, like, it's just all boulders around this lake, and you're crawling up, kind of like pulling yourself up over these, Volkswagen sized pieces of granite. And we've got all the high speed Kafaru, Stone Glacier, Kuyu, like all the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to this old retired horseshoer who we ice fish with sometimes, and Scotty was like, "So how'd you guys do?" I was like, "Well, we got an elk out of such and such," and he goes, "Oh yeah, that's my old outfitter camp back there." I was like, "How'd you get horses there?" And he goes, "Oh, we didn't." I was like, "What? How'd you pack the meat out?" He's like, "Well, you just kind of strap a quarter to your back with some P cord and just kind of climb out."
Yeah, man.
I was just like, "Holy crap, we are so soft! We are so soft."
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of hunting that can be done without having to spend your whole paycheck on the gear.
Dude, a lot of those old timers, they still do it that way too. Like nothing makes you feel dumber when you're hiking around in what you think is the backcountry in, $2,000 worth of gear, and you show up and there's some old timer back there in jeans and like Walmart boots, smoking a cigarette, packing a bowl out. It's like, how? What? Like, why? How did this even happen?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No. Precisely. I try to kill at least one animal in blue jeans a year to make me feel at least halfway in touch with the old school way.
Yeah, you got it. It's just part of the soul building process, brother.
Yeah, exactly.
That's character building. What do you think? What do you think? Like the biggest mistake is that people make when it comes to building points or drawing tags that they want?
I think the biggest mistake is they don't consider what their strengths are. People hear about a thing and they just want to go hunt it because they heard it was good, and they don't consider the terrain, or they don't consider the style of hunt that would be best for it. I think about this a lot with elk hunting. There's a lot of really good elk units in Wyoming that are not suited for someone who's calling. You look at, and I'm okay talking about this a little bit just because they're damn near impossible to draw, but you look at someone, if you're a diehard elk hunter, and you want to come out and hunt Area 100 and bugle your face off, it is not going to be, doing that in the red desert where the tallest thing around is you, is not going to be as effective as if you're in the national forest in the thick northern Idaho. People are just not considering the factors that lend to their success. If you're a spot and stock guy, if you're an archery deer hunter by trade, that Area 100 elk tag is probably going to be right up your alley, because all you're going to do is spot and stock.
I'm intrigued.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And I don't get me wrong, I love calling an elk, but I'd be intrigued with that one.
Well, and that's just the thing is, like, I think your strengths, right? You're like, oh, that sounds like fun. And just so I don't get skewered, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that takes maximum preference points to even have a chance at drawing. So
yeah, like what would that take?
Me over a spit.
That's like north of 10 years to get a tag like that, right?
I have it pulled up here. Oh, you're not even guaranteed with maximum preference points. So you're talking 17 years.
God, that's got to be a good ass unit, man. Man, one day I'm going to draw a tag like that with those kind of odds. One day. Hasn't happened yet, man. I am like the one of the unluckiest people you'll ever meet when it comes to like draw odds or these random draws. I never win them, man. Like never. And so I think that's going to change. That can only go on for so long.
I always it's a law of averages, right? Like you just got to play the game.
You just got to keep going. Yeah.
It's just hopefully you're not in a wheelchair and at a senior citizen home when that happens.
I know what's going to happen, dude. I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to keep putting in. There's a unit in Idaho. I wanted to do the archery hunt for elk for a long time, and I know the unit pretty well. And I've been putting in for it. Never draw. You watch. My girls are old enough now, and I just bought them bows. I'm going to put them in for it this winter. You watch. One of them is going to draw on their first chance. And I'm going to love it. I'm going to jump for joy when they do, man.
That's going to be great. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Like last year, No, I actually don't want to give that one away. Just kidding. It was about a draw. I did that with my significant other. We were going to put in for a party together, and she really wanted the tag, and I was like, yeah, like let's do it. I got the party set up. Don't forget to apply. 2 days after, I was like, all right, did you get in? And she's like, oh no, I forgot to apply. And sure enough, I drew the tag.
No kidding, huh?
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's great, man. One day I'll draw even an Idaho moose tag, and I don't even get drawn on those. Never. But it'll happen. I'm trying to, again, this is what happens when you're on this show, man. I get sidetracked easy. Going back to the biggest mistake, people kind of focusing maybe on the wrong thing or not playing to their strengths. Does that kind of sum that up pretty well? Yeah,
definitely. And I think the kind of, footnote to that is that people aren't taking the time to learn a place. One of my favorite things that I have been doing, and I think probably more folks should consider, is to cow hunt or to doe hunt or to, cross species hunt in a place that they want to hunt. Let's say if you're trying to get this bull tag year after year after year, but it's a general deer area, go try to learn that place with your general deer tag in your pocket, because I think, when it comes down to like, what makes people successful? And I had the pleasure of, obviously I'm a podcast junkie, and I also have interviewed a bunch of guys for the Rich Outdoors Muley Monday. And the number one thing was these people hunt these places over and over again, and they know the country. That just is the defining factor. So I think that people get really myopic about just trying to go for that one bull hunt and don't think about what it really means to learn a place and to hunt that place effectively.
That's a great point. I've never really thought of that. Cause I've been guilty of that. I've, got into a new unit and completely failed because I didn't do any pre-planning or on the ground scouting, or, I just kind of relied and it's the other end of the spectrum that I was getting at earlier, where I love the success, the feeling of success that comes out of being able to locate animals in a brand new area that I've never been in. But I hate the sense of failure when I don't. And so I don't want to be one of those guys that only highlights my good times, right? Because that's happened a lot. And so what do you recommend on that? Something like that.
Well, I had the same experience. And I think that was where, and I can kind of tie it back to where I grew up, but people would come out and burn 16, 18, 20 points to hunt in the Mount Emily unit growing up. And they had lived in Portland, and we'd run into them all the time. They're like, God, why is this such a good elk unit? Like, I can't find any elk. And you're like, brother, you can't swing a dead cat and not find an elk out here. You just don't know, where they would be living. And so it just goes back to this notion that, you gotta do your due diligence. I had the opportunity also to hunt on this Nevada landowner tag a couple years ago. And, this Nevada landowner tag was one of the highest trophy quality areas in the state of Nevada. I kind of was going for a short window, and we had this film crew, and it was a specific kind of scenario, right? Like, it just wasn't like I just lucked into this situation. But I walked out there, and it took us 4 days to find a 4-point. And this is one of the hardest to draw units in Nevada. And that was super eye-opening for me, man. It just is like, when you go out and get your butt kicked, you realize that it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, what success you've had in the past. You got to go out and work every single time you go hunting.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I feel like just Nevada is a tough place to hunt anyway, but I know they have really good units. You kind of said something there. Well, let's not go down that rabbit trail. I've said rabbit trail like 4 times on this episode, dude.
That'll be the episode name. The rabbit trail.
The rabbit trail. The episode of rabbit trail. Every one of my shows is like that, man. So new hunters, I really like the concept of focusing in on their strength and all that kind of stuff. But are there are there like somebody that is maybe having 1 to 2 points in pick your state. I don't care if it's Arizona. That's I guess what I'm going for. Is there opportunity in every Western state for, say, mule deer? Like decent opportunity without waiting 10 years?
Yeah.
Over the counter aside, obviously, right?
Yeah. I mean, you look at mule deer in particular, and there's plenty of opportunity across the West if you pay attention to the way that these opportunities are given out, right? Mm-hmm. For instance, if you weren't paying attention and didn't notice that Idaho has gone to a first come, first serve system for non-residents, that whole system has kind of altered the way that people are getting tags. But there still are archery tags that are guaranteed unlimited draw for non-residents in that state.
Yep.
It just takes a little research.
What are your thoughts on the way Idaho did that with the first come, first serve? As a resident, that doesn't affect me, but I think it's kind of jacked up the way they do it, like right before Christmas. For those of us with young kids and have to pay for an expensive Christmas kind of thing. I don't know. I think it's kind of jacked up, but yeah. I say that from a guy who's, 99% quite satisfied with the way Idaho operates.
They need to just, in my opinion, this is just the sole opinion of Jaden Bales here. I think they need to just do a random draw for all the units that they offer and just not do the first come, first serve. Because
is that you're talking random draw for non-residents?
Yeah, man. And it's a similar way that Wyoming has issued our general tags, and basically they've taken these general or over-the-counter tags and then just allocated them through the draw to non-residents because they're capped. I'd like to see Idaho do that, and they don't have to create some point scheme or anything like that. Just random draw that sucker, just like everything else in Idaho is, and let people know what their percentage chance of drawing a place is, because otherwise, I mean, you're getting so many people with tags in their pocket that either A, they don't want them, or B, they get them as a backup and then they turn them in later. It's just like it's not an efficient system, I don't think.
Well, and I always feel bad for the non-residents trying to get these tags, especially for the elk. Like the website is a disaster. What do they do that, like December 2nd or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, December 1st.
Is it December 1st?
It was this year.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's like that every year, but the website always crashes, and I'm looking. People are posting what position they are in line. I don't know. Something could be better, but again, I don't mean to complain. When it comes to, like, as a resident of Idaho, I have no complaints for the most part of how Idaho Fish and Game manages the tags and the allocations and the seasons. I think Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana are the 3 top states to be a resident big game Western hunter in.
Certainly.
And, so that said, what do you think when I'm not talking about the hunt itself. I'm talking about the process of getting a tag. What would you like? I know you like to talk about, play to your strength and, look at the geographic. But what states are doing it right in terms of how non-residents get tags?
Oh, that's, I honestly think Idaho, let me back this up. If you play multiple state games, as in you're diversified, you've got a bonus point state over here, you've got a random state over here, and you've got a preference point state over here. I think the having the diversification plays into your strength as a non-resident. Mm-hmm. That said, I still think that I don't think that there's a single point system that has proven to be long-term sustainable in the West.
Yeah, I agree.
I just haven't seen one that, and again, the key here is long-term sustainable, because it works in some short-term and for areas that have a lot of tags and a demand that matches, the ability to go hunting there. But when you get again, keep in mind, I grew up in the Mount Emily unit. They alternate whether or not they offer a non-resident tag each year, let alone the fact if they give it to the top preference point holder. That's the thing you got to take into mind. So to answer you very directly, no point systems, I think, are the best long-term approach. So New Mexico, in how they distribute their tags, is good. Idaho is very good.
When you're talking about the point system, do you have an opinion on states, which I think there's two? I think we talked about them, Utah and Montana, that have, you buy your point, and you can buy a preference point. That they basically have the two different approaches to getting points, right?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that in terms of do you have an opinion on that?
So we just went through the Wyoming Wildlife Task Force. There was 18 months of meetings of this task force so that Wyoming could address some of these very issues, because Wyoming has serious preference point creep. Just like we were just talking about, you can't draw Area 100 as a non-resident, even with the maximum amount of preference points, right? So there's your example. And they were looking at what happens when you do all these different draw scenarios, bonus points versus a preference point system, et cetera. And basically, if you run a bonus point system, you get, and folks got to bear with me if they haven't looked at a graph like this in a while, but you get just like a smoothing, an exponential function of when you have a bonus point system. So the top end point holders the majority of them always get the tags, but then you get some people in those mid and lower point levels that grab a tag eventually, here and there. That's not bad. I don't think that is too awful bad, because then at least if you're at the bottom, you have a chance. The preference point game, I'm pretty negative about the preference point game, just because I haven't seen a state where, especially for like the high quality opportunities, that it is held out to be to be very helpful for anybody.
Jaden, when you mention that, like, there's not a state out there that with the point system in general, whether it's preference or draw or whatever, that you feel is long-term sustainable. What is not sustainable about them?
I think the thing that's not sustainable is when you have guys dying of old age who still have preference points in their back pocket. I think that is the punchline. And I think I'm really passionate about that, because the reason why you have preference points is so you can go hunting. And people who have 29 points in Colorado, they should have hunted 20 years ago, in my opinion.
Yeah. There's people that have 29 points in Colorado.
I think that's what it's either 29 or 30 is the top level. It's, I think, the most mature preference point game in that.
Yeah. What are these guys waiting for, man? Is it the state that is preventing them, or is it like they're not burning them?
They're not burning them usually.
Yeah.
And so Sam, our habitat guy at Wyoming Wildlife Federation, he's got plenty of points to draw a sheep tag in Wyoming. And I'm like, bro, Sam, what are you waiting for? And he's like, well, I just had a kid last year, so I'm kind of just, thinking. And then, so he didn't go last year. And then this year, I'm like, all right, Sam, your boy, he can go to a babysitter now. Like, let's go on this sheep hunt. And he's like, well, I should probably get some mules so we can go into the backcountry. He's like, I should get a couple more mules so we can go into the backcountry where the sheep are. And, it's not that his thinking or his logic is wrong. He should make sure he's got his ducks in a row so he can give this hunt its due. But at the same time, man, like, he just keeps dragging her out.
Man. There's a fine line between getting your ducks in a row and paralysis by analysis. And I know, it's like a personality trait with a lot of people I know that are like that too. They're super analytical, and they overthink what the preparation. I mean, I don't care if we're just going coyote hunting down the road in the farmer's field. Like, the amount of planning that they put into it is ludicrous versus me where it might not, a lot of times it might not be enough planning. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. That's always an interesting topic for me. But
yeah, it can be a hindrance, and it can also be a help. You know, just you got to find the balance.
Yeah, for sure, man. Let's kind of bring this back to the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and we touched on it a little bit, man. And I feel like I may have cut it short by going into this tag discussion, but I want to bring it back to particulars in like what Wyoming residents need to be aware of this legislative session prior to all this going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's all right, the place you should look at some of the stuff that we're tracking is on WyomingWildlife.org. We've got, and so this is this is my job. I've got a web page I just put up that has a bill tracker on it. It's called the WWF Bill Tracker. And so you can kind of go see what we're looking at and how, and the things we look at are the ones that impact Wyoming wildlife habitat and our hunting and angling opportunity, right? So most people listening here probably are interested in that stuff.
Well, we have a pretty sizable audience in Wyoming.
Okay.
Let's see
here. One of the things to keep in mind as you're looking at that is that one of the things in mind here is that there's a the nice thing about being in such a small populated state is that you will work with people to achieve a goal. You'll work with someone one day, and the next day you're going to be at the opposite ends of the pole from them on another topic, right? A good group that I don't mind mentioning is the Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association. The folks that run that I think they're honestly very good humans. They're fun to have a whiskey with.
Yeah,
we're going to disagree with them on a handful of topics. And the nice thing is we just understand that from the get-go. And we will work on the stuff together that we think we're going to improve wildlife numbers and it's going to improve the hunting and opportunities in the state. But at the same time, we're probably going to disagree how those opportunities are divvied up because they have a living to make, right? So the only thing is that as I'm kind of setting the stage to talk about these bills is like, we can't, especially in a state as small as Wyoming, you can't burn everybody at the stake for the thing that you don't agree with them on, because the next day you're going to turn around and ask them to help you out of the ditch when you get stuck in the snowdrift, right?
Man,
that's just the way it goes.
That I wish more people understood that concept, especially hunters, man, because we're famous for burning people at the stake, you said, But a great example of what you're talking about is the these American cattle associations. They could be our enemy one day and our best friend the next. Like when it comes to fighting against the anti-hunting movement, there is no better friend to have than the cattle associations. Because they have a lot of lobby power, they have a lot of weight. But when it comes to BLM or public land issues and stuff, they're not so much always the best people to have on our side, right? But I don't know. I just like the way you put that, and I wish more people understood that. So sorry to cut you off with that.
No, well, thanks. I think it's one of the things we got to remember. One of the topics that falls under so you see what I did here, I queued this up. One of the topics that falls underneath that umbrella is going to be hunter trespass and corner crossing. It's one of people, especially people who don't live in Wyoming, it's one of their favorite things to parrot, but one of the few things that they actually get involved with real solutions on. So I hope no one takes that offensively, but that is what we're seeing on the ground as people who are working on this issue.
Sweet. So that is going to be on the docket this year from the Wyoming legislature is a corner crossing issue.
You're going to see trespassing on the docket. So, and
Gotcha.
By trespass, I'm talking about I don't want to. My significant other here is going to kick me in the butt if I screw this up too bad, because this is really where her realm is. But there are a couple of bills. There's two in particular that we're looking at whether or not someone can trespass on private property with a drone, and whether or not you can go through property and get cited for wildlife trespass or hunter trespass.
When you say go through property, you mean actually step foot on private property to access more public land beyond, or are you talking about like through the air?
So they've defined it as saying stepping on the ground.
Yeah.
Like physically on the ground.
Yep.
So, but one of the things you got to watch is like in our wonderful legislative process, we also have the opportunity to add amendments and screw with bills after they've been drafted. So it just is one of those things that like, these are the types of bills and the types of things that we're watching, and we got to make sure that they end up fall in the direction as they're intended.
Gotcha. So this corner crossing thing, man, is mind-boggling to me. We've talked about it a little bit on my show, just because I don't understand it from a sense that where I live and where I mostly hunt is that just doesn't exist. That we don't have this checkerboard landscape, right? But I want to be supportive to hunters and public land advocates and access advocates in other states, just because it doesn't affect me every year. It may someday, at the same time, if I have a major legislative issue that it does not affect other hunters from another state or whatever, I would want their support on it as well, right? So that's why I bring it up, because but you're going to think I'm ignorant with the whole thing, because I don't understand how you could be trespassing like those dudes that put that ladder to access that corner to go elk hunting. I don't understand how that could be defined as trespassing. And granted, it sounds like the court agreed with that. Is the corner crossing specifically going to be in the discussion for the Wyoming legislature in any way, or is it just the trespass thing?
It hasn't been. There's not a bill that we've seen yet, but let's keep in mind today is January 10th, and I don't mean to give up your secret publishing dates, but today was the first day of legislature in Wyoming, so there's certainly an opportunity for it to still come up.
So when you're and don't worry about the dates. When that's one of the reasons I record my show and release them when I do, is because I like to discuss current topics, and so this will be like live probably next week, dude. So, okay. The point is that something that you were mentioning? You guys were doing like I don't remember what you called it, but you guys went to like a brewery and had a comment period on the upcoming legislator, and the state legislature showed up. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Would in that case, would it be like out of line to bring that up to that state legislature and let them know how important it is that something gets, I don't know, confirmed in some sort of law when it comes to this corner crossing thing, so that we could put this issue to rest? Because it's in my mind, from an outsider looking into like residents or non-residents hunting in Wyoming, it's such a stupid thing to be having court dates set, to be having legal action taken over somebody climbing a ladder, and like, it just needs to be settled. How do we achieve this?
I think that what you're going to see, there's a whole slew of ways you can tackle it, because you can tackle it from the federal land management perspective, or you could tackle it from like the state access perspective, right? So there's a world where you can have the BLM start swapping out, because most of the stuff that we're talking about are BLM squares that are in a checkerboard fashion, and you could have them start like a mandate to start blocking them up, so you don't have to actually deal with the corner piece. That's one way forward, and that one, I wish I was a better public land expert on that one. But
I don't know. To me, Jaden, that doesn't even seem realistic to swap the land out. I don't understand why, and I'm not coming at you, dude. I
hear you. This is good.
The frustration that comes from me is the level of ludicrousness. Is that a word?
It can be.
For the Western Huntsman podcast, that is a word from, here on out going forward. I just slam the gavel on it. The lunacy it is that landowners, and I'm a landowner. I own 26 acres here in North Idaho that we live on, and I don't want people trespassing on my land. But I can't imagine as a landowner getting bent out of shape if I had this four corner kind of thing going on in one of my corners, and somebody stepped over it to access the public land on the other side. It just is lunacy to me. And so I guess what is realistic to me is the legislature, who again, they're going to have a pretty heavy lobbying power coming at them from, the cattle and the landowners, in the state of Wyoming. So it's easier said than done. But it seems like it would be achievable to just make it something written that states it is totally fine and not trespassing as long as you don't step on that landowner's land to cross those corners to access more public land. It just, I don't know. It's such a simple solution to me. You know what I mean? And a lot of them are, but it's just lunacy to me.
I think that you're hitting on you hit on a really important point, though, is like, you have to make sure that the people who are in power, who might have more power than you do, are on board with the solution, or else you're just going to beat your head against the wall and create enemies along the way.
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about too is like, you asked me at the beginning, like, do hunters and anglers have a strong voice in Wyoming? I said yes. And I think that what you consider, though, is who are the three players with strong voices in Wyoming? It's hunters and anglers, it's oil and gas, and it's the ranching community.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure those folks are on board, or else if you only have one of those spokes trying to move in the direction, the whole wheel is going to fall apart.
Man, that's a tough one for you guys. I feel for you. And I feel for me, because I have some secret information, Jaden, of this unit I want to hunt in Wyoming at some point, but it is going to involve that checkerboard landscape. And and this is just a guy speaking from somebody who's just at that age where I'm just frustrated with the nature of politics, whether it's state level or federal, and the immaturity that seems to come out of like turning what seemingly are very simple things into overblown insanity. Like, okay, let people have access to the public lands, and in lieu of them not having access for the landowner, maybe there is some kind of tax incentive when you have checkerboard land. Yeah, I just feel like we don't have grown-ups in our political leadership levels at all levels. And I can say that because I don't work for a not-for-profit organization like Wyoming Wildlife Federation, right? And I get that from your guys' side, you guys can't say that kind of stuff. But I am saying that if there are like political leaders, I don't know. Dude, we've been going for over an hour, and I'm already getting fired up over something that isn't necessarily something we need to get fired up for at this point in the podcast. But I'd be happy to do another podcast with you on that topic where we can get really rowdy.
Who might be really good is Jess Johnson.
Oh yeah,
she's really she's got the political mind of the two of us. So yeah, that would be a great podcast for you guys to have at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly open to it, man. I know I've kept you a long time here, so I know we gotta wrap this up. But I just did we leave anything on the table that you feel like, man, I wish I could have gotten this out regarding the upcoming legislature prior to us wrapping this up?
So the last thing is we're bringing a couple bills, and Jess is working on them right now regarding predator hunting, and in particular bears, wolves, and lions. So I'd like for people to keep their kind of head on a swivel for more information about the bills we're calling our bear bills. We have teamed up with the American Bear Foundation. We've actually got a banquet coming up here at the end of the month, and
Isn't
we're
that up in Cody?
Up in Cody. It's
Sweet.
a good time, man.
Yeah.
But we're working on these bear bills, and the idea is to shine a better light on large carnivore hunting, because we know that around every corner, folks look for ways to tear it apart. So I just, if you want me to go into some of the details there, I'm happy to, but also we're going to be communicating about it and hopefully trying to push on some language changes and stuff in Wyoming for our large carnivores.
Is the goal, without getting into too much detail, is the goal with that to kind of solidify bear hunting or carnivore hunting as, where it's like, I don't want to say untouchable. Nothing is untouchable, but just solidifying it in the legislature in a way that protects it from, because let's be honest, you guys have some crazy anti-predator hunting folks out of Jackson that get pretty feisty, and so is that the reason why and is a goal to kind of solidify what bear hunting is for the future of Wyoming?
Well, if you think about the way that the grizzly bear delisting has occurred, it's actually not. It's not even Wyoming as the state of Wyoming that has prevented those bears from being off the list.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so the folks you're referencing in Jackson certainly are a bit of an issue for the future of predator hunting. But at the same time, we've got a large part of the state that is still very supportive. What we're really looking at is the grizzly bear and wolf situation, where the national perspective and the national mood around these critters determines whether we can manage them as a state and determines whether we can hunt them.
Gotcha.
So that's what we're looking at. And just the brief gist of this is basically Wyoming calls bears, wolves, and lions trophy game animals in the regulations. So we're trying to remove the trophy game animal name and just call them large carnivores in the regulations.
Gotcha.
That's step one. Step two, we're looking at requiring a wanton waste, the wanton waste law on large carnivores. So making sure people pack out the meat. They don't have to eat it, but they should pack it out. And I think that would help optics big time when you're looking at all these conversations about anti-hunters and the reasons why things don't go over well with them.
The American Bear Foundation is on board with that concept.
Yeah, I mean Joe at the American Bear Foundation. Have you had him on yet?
Yeah. I had Joe on last year.
He's such a good guy. I like him.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
He's been working with us every step of the way. It's just
Good deal.
Let's get the bear hunters on board. Let's get lion hunters on board. Let's get people. And so far, we've got the trappers on board with this thing. I'd like to see it just plow right through.
Yeah.
I feel like anytime you think that it's going to go that easy, you're going to be sorely wrong. But let's hope for some positivity here.
And how do people find out more about all this? Is it just through the WyomingWildlife.org website? To be able to, the biggest thing I like to provide is the average hunter out there needs to have a voice. And so if they're Wyoming, if they're in Wyoming, how do they have a voice on this?
Number one thing to do is go give us a follow on social media. And honestly, you guys, okay, listen to me. Either A, follow us on social media, or B, do this. Go sign up for our emails and make sure we're not in your junk folder. And that way you can actually get the emails to your inbox when we're asking folks to make a comment, make a difference at the legislature.
Gotcha.
So that's something I'm excited about because it's what I do for my job. But it's important stuff, man. And I try not to send anybody any spam.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. It's super important. And this is how I think that one of the frustrations that have come out, and part of what sparked that series we were talking about that I'm doing with Chris and Guy is one of the things that sparks the frustration from hunters and creates a lot of hostility is I think that hunters feel like they don't have a voice. And that's how it was for a long time. But things have changed now where hunters do have a voice, and the access to being able to express your voice is much easier than it was, like, say, in the 90s. And so, anyway, just wanted to make that point. But Jaden, this has been a really good conversation, man. Really, really enjoyed having you on, and I feel like you got a lot to offer. We could probably keep this going for 2 more hours if we wanted to.
No kidding, man. Well, thank you for having me on. And I know I said it at the top of the show, but again, I think that you're having some really important conversations. I think as hunters, we've been able to not have to consider, what did Chris say? There's 2 types of people in the world, and a lot of hunters are just the ones that want to be left alone.
Yep.
And I don't
he says
think that
there are 2 types of people: those who want to be left alone and those who refuse to.
Yes, and unfortunately, I do agree with Mr. Rowe here. We can't really sit back and rest on our laurels. We just kind of have to use our voice and use it respectfully, because these folks are our neighbors. So.
Well, good deal. How do people find you?
At WyomingWildlife.org. I'm running all those accounts, but then personally, just at Jaden Bales.
That's the one I was going for.
Media.
There we go.
Okay.
At Jaden Bales, and guys, I'll have that in the show notes. I'm gonna also link the Wyoming Wildlife Federation in the show notes. The website for the Idaho Wildlife Federation, guys, has a lot of information. I've got it pulled up right now. You could sign up for volunteer opportunities. You could read about the programs that they offer or run. And then the issues from energy development to sage grouse, science-based wildlife management policy, news, and there is a swag shop, which is always my favorite part on a website. So go check that out, guys, and again, it'll be in the show notes. Jaden Bales, appreciate you much, man. That was a good conversation. We'll talk soon.
Right back at you. Thank you.
You made it. That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Western Huntsman and write us a good review at Apple Podcasts. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you